Saturday, 8:14 a.m. The house felt still in that way it only does before anyone else wakes up. A single thread of sunlight cut through the blinds, landing right across the kitchen counter, where the chipped blue teacup sat waiting for me. ID. Bought it for my mother on her 54th birthday. A pattern of soft violets around the rim that reminded her of the curtains she used to sew back when she still had patience for small, delicate things. I rinsed the cup, tracing my thumb over the chip on the lip. I'd broken it years ago while packing her things after Dad's surgery. She'd said, "It's just a cup, Diane. You can't hold on to everything." But I did. I always did. The kettle clicked off, and the soft hiss filled the silence. I poured the hot water, watched the color bloom in the tea, and thought about how ordinary my Saturdays had become. Clinic paperwork, laundry, a quick grocery run, then maybe a call to my parents if they weren't too tired. We'd talk about the weather, about Ethan's college plans, about the neighbor's new fence. Polite, warm, predictable. Still, even predictability can ache a little. My phone buzzed on the counter. A notification. Facebook memories from 8 years ago. A photo of Mom and Dad standing in front of their porch, grinning, arms around each other. She wore that same cardigan I'd folded this morning, the faded lavender one, soft from 100 washes. I'd found it at the back of my closet last week when I was changing the bedding for fall. It still smelled faintly like her perfume, that powdery rose scent that used to fill our house every Sunday. I couldn't bring myself to wash it again. I sat down with my tea and opened her last message. "We're managing, but comfort's harder these days. Dad's knee acts up when the weather turns. Don't worry, though. We'll be fine." She always said that. We'll be fine. It was her code for, we need help, but we're too proud to say it out loud. I stared at the words for a long moment, feeling that quiet tug in my chest. It wasn't guilt exactly, more like a habit carved deep. I'd been sending them money for years now, ever since I started at the hospital. Little things at first, groceries, bills, repairs. Somewhere along the line, helping became the language of love between us. They didn't say thank you anymore, and I didn't expect them to. I just liked knowing they were comfortable. I opened my banking app. My reflection stared back from the black screen, hair half-pinned, eyes tired. Then the familiar numbers appeared. Balance, transactions, savings. I scrolled to favorites and tapped Lydia Mercer. The screen filled with a soft green glow. My thumb hesitated over the keypad, then typed $2,000. Purpose, for your comfort, my finger pressed send. A brief pause, then the confirmation appeared. Zelle to Lydia Mercer, $2,000, 09/12/2025, 2:17 p.m. for your comfort. I took a screenshot, like I always did. Maybe it was proof for myself that I'd done the right thing, that I was still a good daughter. I saved it in my folder labeled Family, right between old photos and recipes Mom had texted me over the years. The kettle hissed again. I hadn't realized I'd turned it back on. Absent-mindedly, I poured myself another cup, stirring the tea just to watch the ripples. If comfort had a price, I murmured, I could finally buy it for them. The words sounded strange in my empty kitchen. Outside, a lawnmower started somewhere down the street. The air smelled like cut grass and clean beginnings. I tried to let that smell fill the small, hollow space inside me, the one that never seemed to go away, no matter how much money I sent. After all, what was $2,000 really? A month of peace, maybe 2. It was never about the amount. It was about easing something invisible, something neither of us could name. I wanted them to live easily, without counting pennies or worrying about repairs. Maybe it was selfish, too, a way to quiet my own anxiety that they'd ever need me more than I could give. The phone buzzed again, this time with a short message. Received. Thank you, sweetheart. That'll help us breathe a little easier. No emojis, no calls, just words. Soft, practiced, efficient. I smiled anyway. I rinsed the teacup again and set it back in the cabinet, its chip catching the morning light. The cardigan lay folded neatly on the chair, ready to be packed away in the storage box I kept for sentimental clutter. I hesitated, then left it out instead. There was comfort in small rituals. Sending money, folding fabric, washing cups, pretending love could be maintained like a household chore, measured, managed, checked off a list. As I sipped my tea, a quiet sense of warmth spread through me. I thought of Mom's smile when she saw the notification. I thought of Dad's sigh of relief. I thought, for a brief and selfish moment, that maybe this time I'd done enough. The kettle cooled. The house went still again. I didn't know comfort had already been spoken for. September 15th, 7:46 p.m. The smell of buttercream and balloon latex filled the living room. Sweet, plastic, and too warm from the candles waiting to be lit. Ethan stood by the counter, his lanky frame bent over the cake like he was trying not to make a big deal of it. 18 years old today. My only child, taller than me now, but still the same little boy who used to insist I light an extra candle, for good luck. The table was set. Blue and silver balloons sagged near the ceiling, some already drooping to shoulder height. The banner read, "Happy 18th Ethan," in letters I'd ironed onto white cloth after work last night. I wanted it to look handmade, personal. He'd laughed when he saw it, said it looked retro. But as the evening stretched on, the one thing missing was the call. I'd been glancing at my phone every few minutes since 6. It sat next to the paper plates, screen smudged with frosting fingerprints. Each time it lit up, I felt that small leap in my chest. The hope that Mom and Dad had remembered. That they'd FaceTime like they always did, ask Ethan to show the cake, tell him how proud they were. Instead, at 7:22, the message came. Mom, tell him we're proud. Love, Mom. No exclamation mark, no video call, not even a heart emoji. I showed Ethan the text, trying to sound casual. They say they're proud of you. He smiled, polite and quick. That's nice. Can I cut the cake now? He didn't notice how long I stared at the phone after that. I opened Facebook out of habit, scrolling through the flood of birthday comments. Friends, coworkers, even a few of Ethan's teachers. It was a bright little stream of kindness. Then I saw it. A comment under the photo I'd just posted of the cake. Melanie Mercer. Looks nice. Wish I could afford something like that lately, Melanie. My sister. The laugh emoji at the end made my stomach twist. It wasn't cruel, exactly, but it carried that familiar tone she used when she wanted to jab and joke at the same time. I typed back, "It's just a small home cake, nothing fancy," and hit send before I could think better of it. I could almost hear her voice in my head. "Oh, Diane, you always overdo it. You make the rest of us look bad." A new comment popped up seconds later, one of her friends replying, "Aw, Melanie, your parents spoil you anyway, you're fine." I froze. There it was again. That undercurrent I kept trying not to see. The small, silent confirmation that something was off. That the help I sent for comfort wasn't just going to them. I set the phone face down. The laughter from the other room, Ethan and his friends playing a game, felt distant, muffled under the weight in my chest. I stood at the sink, running warm water over the cake knife. The soap smelled like lemon and mint, bright and fake. I focused on the rhythm. Rinse, scrub, rinse. The hum of the refrigerator filled the quiet between motions. I counted the seconds. It took for the water to turn from hot to almost too hot, something to anchor me while my mind tried not to wander. In the reflection of the window, I could see the sagging balloons and the flickering candle stubs. The celebration was over. The mess was small. but the silence had shape. It filled the kitchen like steam. I told myself they were just tired. Maybe Dad's knee hurt again. Maybe Mom's phone had died. There were a dozen reasonable explanations. I wanted to believe one of them, but when I opened my photo app, I saw the screenshot. The transfer from last week. $2,000. For your sigh. Comfort. And underneath, a thought I couldn't shake. If they had enough to make someone else's daughter comfortable, maybe that's where the comfort had gone. I dried the knife and placed it carefully in the drawer. Ethan's laughter drifted from his room. I smiled, trying to let it steady me. He was happy. That was enough. It had to be. Still, when I turned off the kitchen light, the reflection in the dark window looked lonely. Me, standing where I'd always stood, waiting for a call that wouldn't come. They always remembered when they needed something. Birthdays, though, those were easy to forget. I leaned against the counter, the phone cold in my hand. When they needed help, though, I whispered. They never forgot my number. The clinic was quiet that afternoon, the kind of quiet that hums beneath fluorescent lights. I'd stayed late to finish patient notes, the low whir of the air conditioner keeping me company. My coffee had gone cold 2 hours ago, but I still sipped from it between emails, the bitter taste keeping me anchored. Somewhere between signing off on a discharge summary and logging my hours, I opened my personal inbox. Just a small break, I told myself. But my fingers hovered over the search bar, and without really thinking, I typed Zelle confirmation. A neat list appeared, hundreds of them, stacked like sediment. Zelle to Lydia Mercer, $500 LY1-07-2023. Zelle to Lydia Mercer, $500 EO2-11-2023. Zelle to Lydia Mercer, $500 03-06-2023. On and on, tidy as a spreadsheet. I scrolled slowly, the pattern too clean to ignore. Jandek 2023, $500 every month. Then, March 2024, $1,000 for roof repairs. July 2025, $800 for medical expenses. I kept scrolling. The heart emoji appeared almost every time. It had started as a small kindness, a signature of affection. Now it looked like punctuation at the end of a habit. On my desk, the hospital's billing forms lay scattered. Numbers, invoices, signatures. My life was ruled by ledgers at work and at home, I realized. I cared for patients, balanced budgets, monitored health and money alike, always checking for what was missing. I pulled out my notepad and started. Writing, 2021, $4,500 2022, $6,000 2023, $6,000 2024, $8,000 2025, $5,500. So far I tapped the calculator app. Total, $30,000. Quietly, invisibly, over 5 years. I leaned back in my chair, the screen glow soft against the sterile white of the clinic walls. My throat tightened. Comfort was never supposed to have installments. I thought of the chipped teacup again, the one I'd washed that morning a week ago. I'd sent $2,000 for comfort, but what I'd really been buying was reassurance, the idea that I was still needed. The memory came suddenly, sharp as a sting. Dad, sitting on the edge of his hospital bed after knee surgery 3 years ago. His hands were rough, fingers trembling as he held my wrist. "You've done enough, kiddo," he said. His voice had that mix of pride and exhaustion I used to mistake for love. But the next morning, while I was charting patient vitals, my phone buzzed. "Mom, we're still short on the meds. Insurance didn't cover everything. Could you send $800 today? I'll pay you back when I can." She never did. Back then, I didn't question it. I just sent the money, took a deep breath, and told myself this is what good daughters do. But sitting here now, surrounded by other people's recovery plans, I couldn't help seeing the pattern clearly for the first time. Every transfer had a story. Every story had a reason. and every reason blurred together until all that was left was the ritual. I opened another email, one from last winter. Subject: Thank you. Body: We used it for Melanie's car insurance this month. She's been struggling to get to work, poor thing. My chest went still. I remembered that payment, $600, marked for heating bills, so that's where comfort had gone. Into someone else's gas tank. For a moment, I stared at the screen, trying to quiet the storm building behind my ribs. The air conditioner clicked off, and the sudden silence made everything louder. The clocks ticking, my heartbeat. The faint buzz of a vending machine in the hall. I closed the email and pressed my palms together. I wasn't angry yet, just hollow. The kind of hollow that feels clean, almost peaceful, right before the realization lands. I opened my banking app one last time, staring at the history. The green check marks blinked like a pulse. This was the last time, I said aloud, the words barely above a whisper. The last check, the last comfort. It felt good to say it. Final, controlled, like closing a chart after a difficult case. I shut the laptop, the sound sharp in the empty office. The screen's glow died, leaving only my reflection in the dark glass, tired eyes, steady mouth. I gathered my things, slid my notepad into my bag, and turned off the light. The hallway smelled faintly of disinfectant and coffee. I walked slowly, each step echoing on the linoleum. I'd convinced myself this was closure. A line drawn neatly under years of quiet giving, but as the elevator doors closed, a thought flickered at the edge of my mind, soft, mocking, persistent. You've said that before. I pressed my thumb against the strap of my bag, grounding myself. No, this time I meant it. This time I'd finally learned. Still, when my phone buzzed with a new message on the drive home, Mom, call me when you can. Sweetheart. My stomach tightened, because irony has a cruel way of keeping its promises. Laundry hummed in the background, a tired, rhythmic drone that filled the silence of my apartment. The last spin cycle sounded like an old heart straining to finish its beat. I sat cross-legged on the couch, half watching the news, half scrolling through Facebook, that digital scrapbook where everyone pretends life's fine. Then I saw it. Melanie Mercer, September 18th, 9:02 p.m. Hard work pays off, feeling blessed. A selfie with a silver Nissan Sentra gleaming behind her, all polished and smug. The dealership logo in the corner said Hudson Auto and Drive, 15 minutes from my parents' house. My thumb froze over the screen. Hard work? Melanie hadn't worked since May, unless you counted selling vintage mugs on Etsy, which was code for relisting garage sale leftovers. I zoomed in on the reflection in the car window. My mother, Lydia, stood there. A pink sweater. The same one she wore every time I visited. She was smiling. That full, proud, teary-eyed smile she used to give me after my med school exams. The teacup beside me went cold. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but my chest already knew. The money I'd sent last week, the $2,000 labeled for your comfort, it hadn't gone toward heating bills or medication. It had gone toward a down payment. On Melanie's comfort, I opened our text thread. Me: Mel got a car? Mom: Yes. Isn't it wonderful? She can finally drive again. Me: Did you help her? Mom: We just wanted to see her smile again. She's had such a rough year. My heart kicked once, hard enough to sting my throat. There it was. Confirmation. Gentle, casual, like betrayal written in lowercase. I stared at the message bubble for a long time. I typed, I thought that money was for your meds, but I didn't send it. I deleted the line, watched the cursor blink like a pulse, and set the phone down. The washer beeped. I didn't move. My eyes drifted back to the photo. Melanie leaning against her car, peace sign up, lipstick perfect. She'd captioned it like a manifesto of independence. But I could see it now. Every gleam of that hood, every shine of that windshield was my money turned metallic. I got up and walked to the kitchen. The tile felt cold under my bare feet. The teacup sat by the sink, half full of tea gone murky brown. I lifted it, swirled the liquid, and thought about the word comfort. Mom's text from last week floated through my mind. We're managing, but comfort's harder these days. Comfort. That word had worked on me every single time. It wasn't manipulation, not exactly. It was a kind of quiet orchestration. The same tone she used when I was a girl, when she'd say, "We just want everyone to be happy, sweetheart." But everyone never included me. I went back to my phone. Melanie had already updated her status. First drive out of town tomorrow, coffee with Mom. Of course. My throat tightened, half with anger, half with something more fragile. Grief, maybe. Not for the money, but for the illusion that I was helping, that I was needed. I thought of all those transfers over the years, roof repairs, medical expenses, utilities, little digital confessions that kept me bound to them, a $1,000 apology for not visiting enough, a $500 gesture of guilt every month. And every time I convinced myself that generosity was a kind of love, now it just felt like a ledger of mistakes. I opened the fridge. It was nearly empty except for a container of leftovers and a bottle of cold brew. I wasn't hungry, but I poured a glass anyway. The hum of the refrigerator sounded louder tonight, too loud, filling the spaces where laughter used to live. I sat down again and whispered to the empty apartment. The $2,000 wasn't for her smile. It was for their comfort. I traced my finger along the rim of the teacup, the chipped edge catching my skin. But that's what I told myself. I closed Facebook, turned off my phone and sat there, letting the stillness settle like dust. Somewhere out there, Melanie was taking selfies in a new car. My parents were probably celebrating over dinner, proud of how everything had worked out. And me? I was just the invisible donor. The family ATM with a medical degree. The washer buzzed again, demanding attention. I stood up, opened the lid, and stared at the wet clothes. The fabric was heavy, clinging, like the kind of loyalty that never quite dries. I wrung out a towel, water dripping onto the tile, and said quietly, "This was never about the car. It was about who got to feel deserving." The $2,000 wasn't for her smile. It was for their comfort, or that's what I told myself. The clinic clock ticked too loudly. Every second landed like a pulse in my neck, steady but intrusive. Tick, tick, tick. Somewhere between charting patient vitals and refilling prescriptions, I realized I hadn't written a single note properly all morning. "Dr. Mercer?" I blinked. A nurse, Shannon, was standing by the doorway with a clipboard. "You good?" "You've been staring at that monitor for 5 minutes." I forced a smile. "Just thinking." She smiled back politely, but her eyes lingered. The kind of look people give when they sense a small fracture forming in someone who's supposed to be unbreakable. When she left, I stared at the open patient chart, the blinking cursor waiting for words that wouldn't come. My hands rested on the keyboard, but the only thing I could type was Lydia Mercer. Not as a patient, but as the cause of my sudden arrhythmia. By lunchtime, I gave up pretending. I closed my laptop and walked to the break room, where the smell of reheated soup and disinfectant always clung to the air. I sat at the corner table, the one near the window that overlooked the parking lot. Nurses laughed near the vending machine. Someone's phone buzzed. The world spun as usual, indifferent to the small collapse in my chest. I pulled out my phone. Zell, Lydia Mercer, favorite recipient. The name appeared like muscle memory, highlighted in blue. The same spot I'd tapped dozens of times before. Every transfer came with a small hit of relief, like scratching an invisible itch. Convincing myself I was doing something right, my thumb hovered over the screen. Deleting a name isn't deleting love, right? I whispered it under my breath, as if saying it softly would make it truer. I tapped Edit. Then, Remove from Favorites. A small pop-up appeared. "Are you sure you want to remove this recipient?" As if the app itself wanted to give me one last chance. My throat felt dry. The clock on the wall ticked again, syncing perfectly with my heartbeat. Tick, tick, tick. I pressed yes. The name vanished. The silence that followed was strange. Not relief. Not guilt, but something weightless. Like when a storm ends and you realize the thunder had been company all along. That evening, I got home around 8. The air smelled faintly of rain. I set down my keys and coat, microwaved some leftover lasagna, and ate it standing by the counter. The TV flickered quietly in the background, an old game show rerun, audience laughter filling the room with borrowed noise. Across the street, Mrs. Keene from apartment 4B waved through her window. She was watering her plants again, tiny bursts of green against the dull brick. I waved back, forcing a small smile. She frowned, tilted her head like she wanted to ask if I was okay, but then just lifted her watering can in a mock toast. I nodded. Some conversations don't need words. When I turned away, the apartment felt heavier than before. The walls had that kind of hush that amplifies everything. The hum of the refrigerator, the sound of my fork against the plate, the echo of my own breathing. It was the kind of silence that used to mean peace but now just felt like absence. I sat on the couch with my laptop. The light from the screen painted my living room in soft blue. I opened my email, searched Zelle receipts. There they were, a cascade of confirmations, each one neat and polite. Zelle to Lydia Mercer, $500, 03/05/2023. Zelle to Lydia Mercer. $1,000, 3/16/2024. Zelle to Lydia Mercer. $2,000, 09/12/2025. For your comfort, each message was a timestamp of hope. A trail of proof that I'd tried, over and over, to buy peace with affection disguised as assistance. I opened a new folder and named it Comfort Ledger. Then I began dragging the receipts in, one by one. Each file made a tiny sound as it landed, a click, soft and final. Like closing a door on a memory. As I saved the last one, I leaned back and exhaled. My reflection shimmered faintly on the laptop screen, tired eyes, hair pulled back, the faintest tremor in my jaw. You always said money keeps peace, I murmured. But this peace cost too much. I closed the laptop. For the first time in months, maybe years, there was no pending transfer in my list. No scheduled generosity. No apology in currency form. Just silence. And though it should have felt freeing, it only reminded me of something my father once said after a long argument with Mom. Even peace gets expensive if you keep buying it from the wrong person. I didn't understand it then. Now I did. The teacup sat beside me again, empty this time. I turned it in my hand, tracing the small chip near the rim, a tiny imperfection, like proof it had survived something. Maybe I had too. I whispered one more time, to no one in particular. Deleting a name isn't deleting love. Right? The silence didn't answer. But it held me, gently, completely, as I filed the last receipt and shut everything down. She saved the Zelle receipts to a folder labeled Comfort Ledger, and for the first time, her heart stayed perfectly still. Saturday mornings used to mean slow coffee, quiet music and laundry folded to the sound of rain. But that morning, the silence was heavier, not peaceful, just waiting. I sat on the couch in my robe, the light from the window spilling across the rug. My phone rested on the table, black screen reflecting my face. My thumb hovered above the contact. Mom, 10:03 am. My pulse was louder than the ticking clock. I pressed call. The ringtone stretched on, each tone an ache. Hello? Her voice, soft, breathy, familiar. The same voice that used to sing me awake for school. Hey, Mom. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. Do you have a minute? Of course, sweetheart. Everything okay? I just need to understand something. I paused, forcing air through my lungs. Did you give Melanie the money I sent you? A beat of silence, the kind that fills a room with static. Then, she needed a car, Diane, for work. I stared at the teacup in front of me, the chipped rim catching sunlight. What work, Mom? I asked quietly. She's been looking, Mom said too quickly. She's trying really hard. You know how things have been for her. No, I don't, I said. My tone was sharper now, surprising even me. Because every time I ask, you say she's managing, but you never mentioned a car. Or that my money was for her. In the background, I heard a male voice, tired, worn. "Don't start this again, Diane." Dad. The same tone he used when I was 15 and questioned why Melanie never had to do chores. "Start what?" I said. "Asking where my money went?" "Your mother did what she thought was best," he said. "You've always been responsible?" I cut in. "That's the word you're looking for, right? The one who fixes things? Pays for things?" "Diane!" Mom started, but her voice wavered. "You don't understand, honey. She's been through so much. We just wanted her to what?" I said, "Lee, smile again?" "You said that last time. How many smiles does my paycheck have to buy?" There was a shuffle, a thud, maybe the phone passing hands. Then a voice, high-pitched, defensive, and instantly recognizable. "Mom? Who are you talking to?" "Melanie." My breath caught. Before anyone could answer, she said it, a sentence that sliced the room open. "You said she'd never find out." Silence. Real, bone-deep silence. The kind that swallows every sound except your own heartbeat. In that moment, the world narrowed. The hum of the refrigerator, the ticking clock, even my breath all vanished under that one echo. She'd never find out. I closed my eyes. "Mel," Mom said quickly, panic creeping in. "She didn't mean that." "No," I said, voice low, almost calm. "She did." "Diane, please." But the tremor in her voice couldn't undo the truth. I'd been funding not just their comfort, but their secrets. "A family's peace treaty signed with my money." I opened my eyes. The room looked smaller now, like everything I'd believed had shrunk in on itself. My fingers tightened around the phone. "You know," I said softly, "every transfer came with a note. For your comfort." I should have written, "For your convenience, Diane." "Don't talk like that," Dad's voice again, firm, final. "You're overreacting, overreacting." The word hit like an old bruise being pressed. I swallowed hard. "You taught me to be generous, but you never warned me what it costs when the people you love stop earning it." "Sweetheart, wait," Mom said, her voice cracking. "We didn't mean—" I hung up. The sound of the disconnection was sharp, abrupt. A tiny, mechanical click that felt like cutting a wire straight through my chest. For a second, I just sat there, phone still in my hand, listening to the silence that followed. No apologies. No explanations. Just the soft, rhythmic sound of my own breathing. A single tear slipped down before I even noticed it. It hit the back of my hand and shimmered there, warm, small, real. I didn't wipe it away. Across the street, Mrs. Keene's curtains fluttered in the morning breeze. Somewhere, a lawnmower buzzed to life. Life went on, ordinary and indifferent, while mine had just cracked open. I looked at my phone screen again. Call ended. Duration, 3:47, 3 minutes, 47 seconds. That's all it took to break a 5-year pattern of quiet compliance. I placed the phone face down on the table, beside the empty teacup. Then I whispered, mostly to myself, for the first time I didn't apologize for hanging up. The sky was still the color of wet slate when I backed out of the driveway. The wipers squeaked across the windshield, protesting the mist that clung to the glass. 30 a.m. Mileage reset to 0. Coffee thermos riding shotgun, seatbelt buckle digging into its dented side. Gas total, 47 12ers. Half a tank. Half a plan. The 2-hour drive north stretched like a question I didn't want to answer. For the first 40 miles, I told myself I was only going to talk. To clear the air. But the folder on the passenger seat, labeled Comfort Ledger in bold black letters, told a different truth. It was heavier than paper should ever feel. Each printout inside was a tiny confession. Every Zelle transfer, every Venmo payment, every "for your comfort." Numbers instead of apologies. Dates instead of hugs. Outside, Pennsylvania's trees blurred into watercolor green. I used to love these drives. Holidays, birthdays, the road always leading home. But that morning, It felt like I was heading into an autopsy. When I finally turned onto their street, the first thing I saw wasn't the house. It was the car, a silver Nissan Sentra, gleaming like arrogance under the maple tree, rainwater still beating on its hood. Temporary plates. The dealership logo from the next town over, the same one from Melanie's Facebook post. I parked behind it, engine humming low. My hand stayed wrapped around the steering wheel longer than necessary. Then I grabbed the folder and stepped out. The air smelled like damp earth and burnt coffee. Home. But not Mom answered the door before I knocked twice. "Diane," she started, voice small, almost childlike. She wore her robe, hair pinned in a loose bun, like she hadn't slept. "Morning," I said evenly. She stepped aside. "Come in." Dad sat at the kitchen table, newspaper folded but unread. His reading glasses perched low on his nose. He didn't look up. The house smelled of cold casserole and old cinnamon candles. A dish sat on the counter untouched. The same casserole Mom had promised to make for Ethan's birthday last week. It hadn't made the trip. I set the folder on the table. The sound it made, soft but final, cut through the silence. "What's that?" Dad asked, eyes still on the paper. "Evidence," I said. "Or maybe just a record of my bad decisions." I opened the folder and spread out the papers. Zelle receipts. Venmo screenshots. Notes scribbled in my own handwriting. I tapped the last page, a printed total at the bottom. $30,000, $30,000, I said quietly. "All for comfort." Mom's hands fluttered at her collar. "Diane, this isn't necessary." "It is." My voice startled even me. Calm, level, precise. The way I sounded when delivering bad medical news. January to December 2023, I read. $500 a month. I flipped the page. March 2024, $1,000 for roof repairs. July 2025, $800 for medical expenses. Each word echoed against the tile. Mom's eyes shimmered, but she didn't speak. Dad shifted in his chair, jaw tightening. Finally, from the hallway, footsteps. Melanie appeared, barefoot, holding a mug. "Oh, great," she said, rolling her eyes. An intervention. Her hair was perfect. Her nails were painted coral pink. "You can't put a price on family," she said lightly, sipping her coffee. I looked at her, at the smirk, the unbothered shrug, and felt something inside me settle. Not crack. "Apparently," I said. "You can. It's $2,000 this time." The words hung there like smoke. Dad lowered his paper finally, his voice heavy with that old, weary disappointment. "We didn't raise you to keep score, Diane." I looked at him. "No, you raised me to keep giving." Mom's eyes filled then. "You don't understand, sweetheart. Melanie she always needs." I picked up one of the receipts, held it up. "You said this was for your meds, Mom. I didn't question it." "I never do." Melanie shrugged again, looking away. "It's just money." I stared at her. "No, Melanie, it's trust." "You spent that too." The kitchen went still. The refrigerator hummed louder, like it knew better than to interrupt. Mom reached for my hand, but I stepped back. The distance between us felt older than both of us. Decades of unspoken bargains and quiet guilt. "Diane," Dad said finally, low and resigned. "You'll regret this tone someday." I gathered the pages, slid them neatly back into the folder. "I already regret every deposit," I said. When I turned toward the door, no one stopped me. Not a word, not a sound. Outside, the air had turned crisp, sunlight just beginning to break through the clouds. The Nissan gleamed brighter now, the morning making it sparkle, mocking me. I walked past it slowly, letting my fingertips trace the cool metal of the hood. Beneath it, I could smell new rubber, new beginnings, hers, bought with mine. I climbed into my car and started the engine. The wipers groaned once before finding their rhythm. The road ahead was wet, reflective, like it wanted me to look back. I didn't. As I pulled away, the house shrank in the rearview mirror until it was just a shape I used to call home. For a moment, I almost turned the car around and to say one last thing, to end it with grace. But instead, I whispered to the empty car, "They can keep the comfort. I'll take the distance." And I drove north toward nowhere I needed to justify. The printer hummed like a tired engine in the corner of my study, spitting out pages one by one. The air smelled faintly of toner and brewed coffee. Each sheet landed in a neat stack, proof, paper thin and damning. At the top of every page, in bold black type, Comfort Ledger. Columns filled the pages like an autopsy report: date, amount, purpose, notes. I sat at my desk in my scrub top, hair still pinned from work, eyes tracing the rows I already knew by heart. Jan 15, 2023. $500. Monthly support. Keep warm. March 3rd, 2024, $1,000. Roof repairs. We'll pay you back someday. July 7th, 2025. $800. Medical expenses. Dad's knee meds. And then, the newest line. Still damp from the printer ink. Sep 12, 2025. $2,000. Comfort payment. Used for Melanie's car. I highlighted that one in yellow. The color looked too cheerful for what it meant. I added screenshots, Zelle confirmations, Venmo receipts, text messages, each taped carefully to the page. A collage of betrayal disguised as generosity. I used to tell myself these transfers were my way of staying connected. That even if they didn't call, even if they forgot birthdays, money meant I still mattered. Now, I saw it for what it was. Hush money I paid myself. When people say money can't buy love, I murmured, sliding a glue stick across the next photo. They forget it can buy silence. The clock on the wall clicked over to 8:42 p.m. Outside, a light rain began tapping the window, soft and steady, the sound of punctuation on an ending I hadn't realized I was writing. By 9, the binder was finished. 31 pages, plastic sleeves, labeled tabs, a ledger of loyalty, and its receipts. I ran my fingers down the spine, feeling its weight. How strange to hold years of devotion reduced to 12 ounces of paper and ink. I printed one more copy. Then, without hesitating, I slipped into my raincoat and walked outside. The backyard smelled of wet earth and fading summer. The fire pit was cold from disuse. I knelt, arranged the pages in a stack, and struck a match. The first corner caught fast, curling inward like a secret trying to hide itself. Orange light flickered against the damp air. The smoke rose in thin ribbons, carrying numbers and names into nothing. $500, $1,000, $2,000. Gone. The rain hissed faintly against the heat, like it was disagreeing with my decision. But I didn't stop. I watched until the last sheet, the one labeled, "Used for Melanie's car," shriveled to ash. Then I whispered, barely audible, "Comfort, accounted for." When the flames faded to embers, I stood there for a while, palms open to the drizzle. The air was cold, grounding. Back inside, I took the second copy, the one I'd kept safe, and slipped it into a drawer in my filing cabinet, under R for records. Not for revenge. Not even for proof. For memory. For the next time someone said, "You're overreacting." In the kitchen, the house felt strangely quiet. Not empty, just still. I walked to the sink, filled it with warm water, and reached for the chipped blue teacup. The one I'd washed the morning I sent the money, soap, water, circular motion. The rhythm was slow, deliberate, like erasing something from the inside out. I watched the last traces of ash on my fingertips swirl down the drain, disappearing into nothing. The clock read 9:57 p.m. The printer light blinked idle. Outside, the rain stopped. I dried the teacup with the edge of a towel and set it on the counter. Clean, waiting, whole again. My voice came out a whisper, just for the room. Comfort doesn't come from money. It comes from what you finally stop paying for. And for the first time in years, I sat down at my table with no one to account for but myself. The doorbell rang just as the evening light began to fade. That soft, amber hour when the neighborhood went quiet and the world felt tired in the same way I did. Through the frosted glass, I saw a small figure in a raincoat holding something wrapped in foil. When I opened the door, Mrs. Helen Keene stood there, my neighbor from 2 doors down. Silver hair, garden gloves in her pocket, kind eyes that always seemed to know more than she let on. "Evening, Diane," she said gently. "Thought you could use a warm dinner." In her hands was a casserole dish, steam fogging the foil, the smell of baked chicken, rosemary, and cream spilling into my doorway. I hesitated, the kind of pause that comes after too many weeks of polite distance, then stepped aside. "Please, come in. It smells incredible," she smiled, her eyes flicking to the quiet house behind me. "Didn't seem right to eat alone tonight." We set the dish on the counter. The heat radiated through the foil, warming the chilled air that had settled in my kitchen since the phone call. Underneath it, folded neatly, was a small handwritten note. "Comfort doesn't come from checks. H. Keene." I stared at the words for a long moment before speaking. "That's a good line," I said softly. Helen chuckled, pulling off her raincoat. "Not mine. My mother used to say it. Usually after my father tried to apologize with jewelry." I laughed, quietly, but it felt good. The sound came from somewhere unclenched. She reached into her bag and produced a small loaf of bread. "Homemade. Don't ask me for the recipe. It changes every time I run out of patience." We sat at the kitchen table, the one I hadn't eaten at since the ledger burned. The casserole between us glistened golden in the dim light. "Smells like Sundays used to," I said, almost to myself. Helen's eyes softened. "Used to, huh? Sounds like there's a story in that." I poured us both coffee, the familiar scent filling the room. "You could say that. My family prefers distance. Unless there's money involved." She nodded, not with surprise, but recognition. "My brother was like that," she said. "Gambled away my retirement. Came back around when he heard I still had the house." I blinked. "What did you do?" "Nothing," she said simply. "I didn't open the door." Her words landed quietly between us, the way truth often does, without force, without apology. I leaned back in my chair. "That must have been hard." Helen smiled faintly. "The first month, yes. The first holiday, harder. But after that, I realized peace isn't lonely. It's just quiet." I exhaled slowly, feeling that sentence sink into the same space the fire had cleared the night before. "Family isn't blood," I said finally. "It's whoever shows up when you stop paying for the visits." Helen looked up, eyes gleaming. "Now that's your line, dear." We ate slowly, the casserole soft and comforting, the coffee warm against the October chill. The conversation drifted, about her late husband's garden, the noisy teenagers down the street, the way Pennsylvania rain always smelled faintly of iron. At one point, I laughed, genuinely, unexpectedly, when she confessed she once threw a lasagna at her kitchen wall out of sheer frustration. "I missed the plate," she said, shaking her head. "Had to repaint the whole thing. Worth it, though." The laughter that followed wasn't forced or polite. It was real, a sound I hadn't made in weeks. Maybe months. When the plates were cleared and the kitchen had that gentle hum of post-dinner peace, Helen stood and covered the dish again. "You keep this for now. Bring it back when it's empty, or when you've got a story to trade," I smiled. "I'll do both," she patted my shoulder, eyes crinkling. "Good. The world's kinder when we feed each other." After she left, I washed the cups and set them to dry beside the sink. Then I noticed the casserole dish, its floral pattern faintly faded, one handle chipped, ordinary, imperfect. I touched its edge, feeling the faint warmth still trapped inside. The blue teacup sat nearby, clean and empty from the night before. I placed the casserole dish beside it, different kinds of comfort side by side, one solitary, one shared. I poured the last of the coffee, sat by the window, and watched the streetlights flicker on. Somewhere down the block, Helen's porch light glowed yellow against the dusk. I thought of her words, her laughter, the steady way she'd looked at me when I mentioned money and silence. Maybe healing didn't need to be grand or loud. Maybe it just showed up at your door. Holding a casserole, I took one last bite. Rosemary, cream, and something I hadn't tasted in a long time. Care. The last line of my day came unspoken but certain. Comfort doesn't come from checks. It comes from hands that bring something warm. It had been a month since the drive north, since the casserole, since the ledger turned to ash in my backyard. The air had cooled, the leaves along my street beginning to bronze and curl, and my house smelled faintly of vanilla and something new, stillness that didn't ache. Ethan was home for the weekend, taller than I remembered, with that slight awkwardness young men carry when they've just begun to outgrow their own shadows. Thought we could do something small, I said, setting down the cake I'd baked that morning. Just a simple vanilla sponge, one candle in the center, he grinned. One candle? Your first month of adulthood, I said. You only get one, make it count, he laughed, the sound echoing through the kitchen that had grown too used to silence. The backyard was lit by string lights we'd hung years ago, the same ones that had survived every storm and power outage. We ate on the patio, paper plates, plastic forks, cheap lemonade, and the kind of quiet that didn't need explaining. When I looked across the yard, I caught a flash of memory. Last year's birthday, my parents' faces glowing through a video call, Melanie's laughter in the background. This year, there was nothing. No calls, no messages, not even the illusion of togetherness, and strangely, it didn't sting the same way it used to. After dinner, Ethan reached into his backpack and pulled out a small envelope. Got you something, he said. I frowned. It's your birthday, not mine. He shrugged, smiling in that quiet, confident way that reminded me too much of his father. Still, you've done enough, Mom. It's your turn. I opened the envelope and froze. Inside was a $200 grocery gift card, with a sticky note wrapped around it. On the note, written in his rushed handwriting, "For your comfort this time." Something caught in my throat. Not sadness, not joy, but the thin, fragile thread between the two. I looked up at him, blinking back the kind of tears that don't ask permission. Ethan, you didn't have to. I wanted to, he interrupted. You've been sending money my whole life. To me, to Grandma, to whoever needed it. Maybe it's time someone sent a little your way. His words landed gently but firmly, like the world turning over, quietly rearranging its weight. We sat there in the fading light, the candle flickering between us. He leaned back in his chair. Do you think you'll ever talk to them again? I thought about it. The blue teacup, the ledger, the silence that followed the last phone call. I don't know, I said. But I think I've said enough without saying anything. He nodded, understanding more than he could possibly say. The sky dimmed to a deep navy. Crickets started their evening chorus. Somewhere down the street, Helen's porch light flickered on, same as it did every night. Ready? Ethan asked, motioning to the candle. Ready. We leaned in together. 1 month of adulthood, I said. Make a wish. He closed his eyes, grinning. You first, so I did. Not for forgiveness. Not for reunion. Just for peace, small, ordinary, and mine. We blew out the candle together, the smoke curling up like a whispered prayer that didn't need an answer. Later, after he went inside to pack for the drive back to college, I stayed on the patio. The night air was crisp. My phone sat beside me, its screen dark. I unlocked it once, habit, muscle memory, and saw nothing. No missed calls, no new messages, just stillness. And yet, for the first time, the absence didn't hollow me out. It felt like space. Clean, breathable, earned. I whispered to the quiet yard. Peace didn't come from forgiveness. It came from distance measured in quiet. Through the kitchen window, the reflection of the candle's smoke still lingered faintly against the glass. Inside, the casserole dish sat drying beside the blue teacup, both washed clean. Ethan's gift card rested by the refrigerator magnet, a small, bright rectangle of care. The light from the patio strung softly over it all, like memory rewritten in gentler ink. I stood, gathering the plates and the half-finished cake, and paused for one last look at the candle. Melted, crooked, but somehow beautiful in its small defeat. In another life, I might have photographed it for Facebook, tagged my parents, waited for their hearts and comments. Not tonight. Tonight, there was nothing to prove, only a kind of quiet that finally felt like comfort, the kind you don't have to buy, or send, or measure in dollars. As I turned to go inside, I whispered, not bitterly, not sadly, but simply, the truth I'd learned the hardest way. In the end, comfort was just another word they spent on someone else, and this time, it didn't hurt to say it. It just meant something different.